Hello and welcome back. Today I am trying out the brand new Dior Forever Skin Glow Foundation. I did buy this with my own money. I did not receive it in PR. I have detailed timestamps and additional information listed below in the description box in case you wanted to check anything out. And with all of that out of the way, let's get into the video. Good morning. It is 5:15 right now. You know the drill. I've got a cup of coffee right here. I love this mug. Alex got it for me for Christmas because it's a black cat. It looks like our cat Ninja. The resemblance, of course, is uncanny. Today I'm trying out the new Dior Forever Skin Glow Foundation. I haven't swatched this yet, so I am hoping that it's a good shade match. I have another Dior foundation, the Dior Forever Natural Nude. I picked this one up in the shade 2N, and it is way too dark for me. So I did shade down and get this one in the shade 1 Cool, or 1 CR, 1 Cool Rosy, instead of the neutral shade. So I hope that this one works out better. Going over the basics real quick, it is $52 for 1 fluid ounce, which is pretty standard for a foundation. There are 42 shades in this range that go from fair to deep. It does seem to correspond with the other existing lines in their foundation range, so I imagine that you'd be able to pick the same shade across the multiple lines if that is something you are interested in doing. Now for some swatches. First is the Dior Forever Skin Glow in the shade 1 CR. Next is the Dior Face and Body in the shade 1N. Dior Forever Natural Nude in the shade 2N. Dior Forever Skin Correct Concealer in the shade 2N. NARS Light Reflecting Foundation in the shade L2 Mont Blanc. YSL Bare Look Tint in the shade Nu 2. And the Ilia Super Serum Skin Tint in the shade Rendezvous. It's also a medium to full coverage foundation with a radiant finish. It is meant to be a long-wearing, hydrating foundation. It claims to last for up to 24 hours. It's supposed to improve your skin with use over time, and there is broad spectrum SPF 15. Some of the description makes it seem like it's really similar to the NARS Light Reflecting Foundation that I reviewed last week, so I am interested to see how the two perform against each other. There's a couple of skincare hybrid foundations that have come out recently. I think the Charlotte Tilbury one is another one that claims to be skincare and makeup too, and I was interested in picking that one up once my shade becomes available. I don't have primer or anything on right now. I just have my regular bare minimum skincare routine so that I can see how radiant and hydrating and all of that the foundation actually is without any kind of help from outside products. I have sprayed a couple of pumps onto my palette in front of me. Here is what it looks like swatched on my hand. It does seem to have a very radiant finish right off the bat. I'm going to do a brush on one half of my face, and then I'm going to do a sponge on the other side of my face so that we can see what the two applications look like compared to one another. This one does seem to be fast drying as well. I noticed that it was drying down pretty quickly once I swatched it on the back of my hand, so I probably should work on testing that out before I start talking, because then we get put in this situation where I'm rushing to blend it out. I don't really see too much of a difference from that very light application. I've dipped my brush directly into the foundation and I'm stippling it on. Dior does recommend applying this with a brush for perfect uniform coverage. So I am first stippling it. Here is what one layer of foundation looks like compared to no foundation. When I look in the viewfinder, the shade doesn't look to be too off, but I think that if it deepens up even a little bit more, there's going to be way too much of a stark difference. For being Dior, this one is not scented, or it's not heavily scented. I didn't notice anything until I was right in front of my nose that there was a scent. And normally Dior products are very scented, so I do like that this one is not overly in your face with the scent. It's definitely not full coverage, at least with one layer of application. I think that it's a good medium, maybe a low medium, because I still have some problem areas that I think are peeking through, but I guess I would be okay with saying it's a medium coverage. The pump on this is not good. My first real critique of the foundation is that the pump, it spits. It does not disperse the foundation very nicely, so that is something I don't like for a $52 foundation. I feel like for that much money the pump should, you know, work, but that's fine, I guess, for what it is. I am going to dot now around my face for the sponge. I have a feeling that this one and the sponge won't be best friends, but maybe it'll surprise us and blend out without getting eaten up too much by the sponge. So just patting that out. With the brush side, I do think that it became more of a natural satin finish. With the sponge, I definitely think it's more luminous, more radiant. Personal preference wise, I do think I prefer the way that it looks with the sponge than I do with the brush. I think with the brush it looks heavier than how it looks with the sponge, but I definitely got more coverage with the brush. So I think it depends on what you're looking to get out of this foundation for which application method so far would be the one that would work best for you. If you want more coverage and more of a satin finish, then the brush definitely would work. If you're looking for more of a light coverage, more radiant finish, then the sponge would be the way to go. I am going to try and build up with the sponge side. This time I did dip the sponge into the foundation instead of placing it around my face. See if I can match the coverage levels on both sides. I do notice that as I continue to let this side sit while I work on this side, that it is deepening up even further. If you can shade down, I would recommend shading down, because when it dries down, it is definitely a different shade than when you're first applying it. When I look up close between both sides of my face, I do notice that the sponge application side looks a lot more seamless. It looks a lot more natural, really like it is my skin but better, versus with the brush side, again, it is a little bit more of a heavier application. It doesn't feel heavy, but when I'm looking up close, I do feel like you can tell that it's makeup versus what it looks like on the other side. I'm going to go finish my makeup off camera, and I will come back and give you my preliminary thoughts. Here is the finished makeup look. It's been on for a little over 2 hours between getting dressed, curling my hair, and putting the rest of my makeup on. So here is what it looks like up close. If you were interested about any of the makeup that I used, I do have it listed down below in the description box if you wanted to check that out. My thoughts so far are not immediately positive. I really wanted to like this foundation. The claims are things that I'm really interested in, or things that I typically look for in a foundation, but so far with the application and then how it's been wearing the last couple of hours, I am not as happy as I would have liked to have been at this point. I guess my first real problem with the foundation is the shade. It's not unwearable, but it's dried down to a shade that looks more orange than skin tone color. The shade does go down to 0, so I have 1, and there are 0 shades. There are lighter shades in the 0 range as well, so I don't know if this is something I went in store and swatched, if it would have given me a better shade match, or if maybe I just don't have a shade match in the Dior range. So right off the bat, I'm not super happy with the shade. That's not a huge deal. It can be fixed with mixing other products in. I don't like how heavy it looked with what I thought was a very light application using the brush. It's lightweight enough. It did dry down. I was able to apply my products on top of it. I am using all cream products today. I didn't try any powders, so maybe it will interact differently with powders, and powders will be more blurring or more forgiving. That is, again, something that I'll be trying later with additional wear tests, and I'll give you my updated thoughts at the end of the month in a foundation roundup video. But for how I'm feeling right now, I don't love the way that this is looking so far. In terms of coverage, I don't think that even when I built it up, it got to what I would call full coverage. It was a low medium from the beginning application. Obviously, I got less coverage when I used the sponge, but I don't think that even when I built it up, I was able to achieve full coverage. So I would say this is about a solid medium. I don't think this is the most radiant foundation that I've tried. Obviously, you can pair it with additional products to bring out more luminosity if that was something that you're looking for. But I do think this has more of a satin finish versus what I would say a radiant finish would look like. It is 2 o'clock, so the foundation has been on for a little over 8.5 hours, or just about 8.5 hours, and I am getting ready to go to a family event. So I wanted to pop in here real quick and show you what the makeup looks like. So far I am in natural lighting. I have no studio lights on or anything. It's just the light that is coming in off of the window, through the window. It is just the light that's coming in through the window. That I will give you a closer look at how the foundation is wearing so far. Keep in mind, this foundation is meant to be a 24-hour long wearing, up to 24-hour long wearing hydrating foundation, and I feel the need to point that out because of how it is wearing. I don't have any primers on, I didn't use any setting sprays, I didn't use any powders because I really wanted to see how the formula and the finish and all of that performed. But I think that you can see, or I think it's very clear, especially from what I can see in the viewfinder, I think it's very clear that the foundation is not holding up to those claims very well. I have a pretty dry skin type, especially in the winter. I can be more normal, but I typically don't get oily. I typically don't have major foundation breakdown before the end of the day. And for what I'm seeing right now, it is not what I would typically see, or what I think I typically see in how a foundation wears on my face. I think it's pretty clear that there's a lot of shine going on, so I'm very shiny, very oily looking, very greasy looking in the center of my face, as well as the center of my forehead. I am actually debating whether or not I want to blot because I am going out, and the intention of this foundation was to be worn through the entirety of the day in the events that were going on today. And after I put the foundation on this morning, before I put the rest of my makeup on, I actually went to my husband and I said, I really don't like the way that this foundation looks. And that was just right after the initial application. And now 8.5 hours in, I'm still unhappy. I'm obviously more unhappy than I was when I first applied it because it's had time to do what it's doing. I don't think that it's performing well. I don't like this shininess or this greasy looking thing that is happening. The foundation shade has also deepened throughout the day. It's continuing to be a worse shade match. Like, as the day goes on, it just is getting worse and worse. And to reiterate, it's not like a real skin tone. It's turning more orange, very apparent that it is a oxidizing foundation versus something else. I don't even know where I was going to finish that statement, but this is not how I would typically want my foundation to wear. You know, here up close you can see that the shine that's coming through isn't just radiance or luminosity. It's clearly looking like oils and grease that are separating and breaking down the foundation, which again is not a problem that I typically have. And then here by my nose, you can see especially it's starting to crack and break apart, and it's like fully separating all right there. It is wearing a little bit better on the side that I applied with the sponge, but I wouldn't say it's wearing a lot better at this point. I think that the breakdown, the oiliness, it's all kind of catching up to each other. I'm getting some wear off along my chin, but not nearly as bad as the wear off I was getting with the NARS foundation. That has been my experience so far, and I will see you again at the end of the night. It is 7:15, so it has been on for about 14 hours, and I am definitely ready to take this makeup off. I haven't looked at it too closely since my last check-in, but I do want to point out that I have continued to get shiny throughout definitely the center of my face. If you are familiar with the Bite Changemaker foundation, this might make more sense because I think that foundation kind of acted the same way, where at different times it looked good and at other times it looked bad. So on application it may have looked good and then a half hour later it looked bad and then it kind of came back together. So I kind of feel like that happened with this foundation, because at my last check-in I was pretty much ready to write the foundation off. I was really unhappy with how it was looking around the center of my face with the oiliness, but then it was also breaking down and it looked like it was cracking. But now 6-ish hours later, I'm back looking at the foundation and I almost don't see some of the problems that I was talking about anymore. The parts where I thought that it was breaking down, it seems to have settled back into itself or rehydrated, or somehow it seems to have blended itself in. I didn't touch it. I didn't do any kind of touch-ups. I didn't pat anything in. So it just looks to me like it kind of worked itself out after I had given up on it on the last check-in. I do still think that it's kind of starting to crack around my smile lines, and I don't think that it has really worn the full up to 24-hour claim. I definitely think that there are some spots. There's a lot of wear off on my nose. I didn't wear a mask today, so the fact that there is a considerable amount of rub off on my nose I think is a little bit strange. I don't notice any kind of creasing really around my forehead lines. I only notice a little bit of cracking around the sides of my nose. I notice the foundation has worn off of my acne scarring really the most. So the stuff that I want or would want to be covered for the longest amount of time is the least covered at this point. So I'm not a fan of that. Considering I have some healing acne breakouts, I do think that it wore pretty well over those. I don't think that it's the best, but it definitely wore better than like the NARS one, where it really gathered and made those spots a lot more emphasized. I don't feel like this foundation has emphasized the fact that they're there. And again, the shade problem, where I feel like it just continued to turn orange or more orange throughout the course of the day. I definitely feel like I'm more so wearing my summer shade than I am wearing my winter shade right now, when in theory this should have been my winter shade all along. I don't like the shade difference at the end of the night versus what it looked like when I first applied it. But this is a close-up of how it's looking after 14 hours of wear. Let me know, what do you think about this foundation? Do you agree with me with how it looks, or do you think that it looked just fine and I am just reading way too much into it? I would love to know what you're thinking. Are there any other foundations that you're really interested in reviews on? I would love to know so I could pick those up for you. Otherwise, that is going to be all from me today. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. And thank you so much for hanging out with me. I will see you again very soon in my next video.